So once again, my name is Guy Cohen. I go by I'm Really Important here on Twitch and YouTube and TikTok. And just for my audience, we're lucky to have Congressman Ritchie Torres, who represents New York's 15th Congressional District. He's been representing that district since 2021, one of the younger members of Congress too. So it's always fun to talk to you, and I appreciate you making time for us here on this new media.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for flattering me and calling me young. My dating profile says I'm congressionally young, so I appreciate it.
That's good. All right, so we're here today to talk about the one big beautiful bill, and I know it's not getting a lot of attention, but it's about to heat up. So there's a lot of questions about this, and I'm fascinated with the bill. I don't know what these guys are up to. It seems like it doesn't even reward people at the top that much, but punishes people at the bottom more. So I'm just kind of curious your general thoughts on this bill as it takes shape in the Senate and the House's version as well.
Well, the so-called big beautiful bill is the ugliest piece of legislation in the recent history of the United States. And it represents a radical redistribution of wealth from the working class and the poor to the top 1%. So the big beautiful bill contains about $1 trillion worth of budget cuts, right, in order to fund $1 trillion in tax cuts, not for working people, not for middle class people, but simply for the top 1%. And keep in mind that the top 1% has 12 times more wealth than the bottom 50%. And yet we're defunding healthcare and food and education for the bottom 50% in order to finance tax cuts for the top 1%, for multimillionaires and billionaires. I cannot imagine a greater betrayal of the working class and a greater misplacement of priorities than the ugliness of the big beautiful bill.
Yeah, what do they hope to gain from this by taking away health insurance, by taking away $6 in SNAP benefits from single moms? Like, what, I mean, from what I've read, these people are already working, they're trying their hardest. Like, what problem do they think they're solving here by going after these people? I think if you make $15,000 a year, the government should leave you the hell alone.
Look, I have constituents who, after spending all their income, after paying all their bills, only have $20 a day. And so Republicans are effectively defunding healthcare and food, SNAP and Medicaid, for those living on $20 a day to provide Elon Musk with a tax cut. And the only explanation is that Republicans have contempt for the working class and operate as the party of billionaires. I mean, that's what the Republican Party has become.
Yeah,
Medicaid is the greatest social safety net program, and it's under assault.
Yeah, I don't know what value you bring to the nation by making people less healthy and hungry. It makes no sense to me at all. And from what I've seen, it doesn't even seem like the people at the top get that much of a break here from it. Obviously, they get the most of it, but it's not even that big of a deal. It's not like life-changing for these people either. So that's why I said it just seems like they're trying to punish people at the bottom. It's wild.
Now, those on the top will see about a 4% increase in their income, and those at the bottom will see a 4% decline in their income. But a 4% decline in the income for those at the bottom is going to have a much more destructive impact, right? Because, if you're living at the margins, every dollar counts. Yeah. You're struggling to put food on the table and pay the bills and keep your family afloat. And it's not only going to affect individuals, it's going to affect institutions. So, yes, in my district, the largest employer is the Montefiore Health System, which employs tens of thousands of people. Montefiore depends heavily on Medicaid. Without Medicaid, the whole system would come crashing down. It would lead to the disemployment, to the displacement of tens of thousands of people from their livelihoods.
Yeah, last time we talked, we just had the budget framework where they identified $880 billion from energy and commerce they wanted to cut. So we knew they had an idea. But now we have more details here. And so I wanted to ask you about this provider tax, which is something that they're going after. I imagine in New York, they've taken full advantage of this, and it's like 6%. So maybe you can explain it better than I can. But my understanding is the state charges a tax to the hospitals and the providers so they can get more of a cut from the federal government and then pay more back to the hospitals. And that is under threat. Like a huge chunk of that is under threat right now in this bill, right?
So the provider tax is just one strategy that states use to secure desperately needed Medicaid funding. And keep in mind that most hospitals in places like New York are either teetering on the brink or in the red. So almost no healthcare provider can afford the kind of draconian cuts that Republicans are going to impose on the Medicaid program. There's no district that's more dependent on Medicaid than mine. Like 67% of my constituents are enrolled in Medicaid.
Wow.
Medicaid covers more than 70% of children, more than 80% of nursing home residents, more than 90% of baby deliveries in the Bronx. And so this bill is a catastrophe for the poorest congressional district in America. And under congressional Republicans and Donald Trump, 16 million Americans are in danger of losing access to healthcare. 16 million Americans, largely because of a $715 billion cut to Medicaid.
Wow. And then on top of this, they have this idea of work requirements, but it seems more like work reporting requirements, because from what I've read, these people are already working, or they're going to school, or they're taking care of somebody. And how are they going to prove some of this stuff to the government? It's not like all these people have a W-2 from working at Subway or something. Maybe they're helping out a friend or a neighbor or elderly or something like that. I mean, what kind of impact are these work requirements going to have on people in your district?
So work requirements are actually paperwork requirements. Like, work requirements do not lead to more work. It simply leads to more paperwork. And we've seen this failed experiment before. So in 2018, Arkansas put in place the first work requirements program. And within the first 5 months, it led 17,000 people to lose their health insurance. And it turns out that the majority of those people were working people who were eligible for Medicaid, but because of paperwork errors, lost access to their health care. So paperwork requirements do not boost employment. It simply causes people to lose access to health care. And that's the purpose. Republicans want fewer people to have access to health care in order to free up funds for their massive tax cuts for billionaires.
And this is on top of the ACA subsidies not being extended that were in the Inflation Reduction Act. So millions of people will lose their health insurance there, not being able to afford that as well. And I'm sure you're going to see some impact in your district too on that front.
Yeah, so the largest cause of people losing their health care is going to be the $715 billion cut to Medicaid. But then to your point, there are going to be millions of people who lose their health care because of the failure of the Republicans to extend the ACA subsidies. So there's a combination of policies that are going to cause up to 16 million people to be deprived of their health care.
Yeah, it just blows my mind that they're going after these people. These people need all the help they can get, and to punish them to pay for this stuff is crazy. And on top of that, the other big thing is the SNAP benefits. I guess they want to add work requirements, work reporting requirements for people from 54 to 64. I guess they think those people aren't trying hard enough or something for their $6 in food stamps a day. I mean, what's wrong with these guys?
The SNAP budget is effectively $2 a day.
Is it? Okay, it's lower than I thought.
It's modest, and so the notion that the majority of people who benefit from these programs are families, are mothers with children. Like the number of able-bodied adults without children who are receiving these benefits is a vanishingly small number.
Yeah, the way the Republicans talk about it, it seems like there's millions of guys in their 20s sitting at home playing Xbox all day, getting free food and enjoying their health care somehow. I don't know what this weird image they've painted of Americans is, but it just seems so off to me. And I don't even know how they get away with this framing of the issue. It's wild.
I'll give you an example. So the New York State Medicaid program, when it comes to children, the New York State Medicaid program pays around $3,300 per beneficiary. When it comes to adults, $5,900 to $6,900 per beneficiary. But when it comes to the elderly, it's $32,000 per beneficiary.
Wow.
And when it comes to the disabled, it's $35,000 per beneficiary. So these programs overwhelmingly benefit those in greatest need, right? In New York State, adults and children make up 80% of the enrollees, but but senior citizens and the disabled make up 60% of the expenses.
Yeah, I mean, and what are these people going to do? They're just going to suffer. I mean, there's no alternative.
There's no alternative. And people should recognize that Medicaid is not only health insurance for the lowest income, but it's become long-term care for the elderly and the disabled and chronically ill. So most nursing homes, most assisted living, most home care is funded by Medicaid. And so Republicans are defunding Medicaid at a time when we have an aging society.
Yeah.
When more and more people are living longer and longer and their healthcare needs are becoming more complex, it is the worst possible time to defund long-term care and its primary funding source, which is Medicaid.
And just to make a final point, you said this at the beginning, but this loss of Medicaid funds is going to hurt even the facilities because that's a lot of the customers that are there. So if they lose all those customers, it's going to hurt everybody, whether you have Medicaid or not.
In most counties in America, the largest employer is the healthcare provider.
Yeah.
And it's even more true in rural America.
Wow.
So Republicans are inflicting damage on their own constituents, on rural hospitals that are in danger of collapsing.
That's mind-blowing to me. But you do see some Republicans sounding the alarm.
Mitch McConnell said, get over it. That was his solution. It says, get over it. That's the attitude that Republicans have.
Do you think people like Senator Josh Hawley or Susan Collins, who are kind of raising the alarm, will have any impact on that, or are these cuts going through the way they are now?
I saw a number of Republicans in the House sign on to letters opposing the Medicaid cuts, and then in the end they fall in line and vote for the Medicaid cuts. So I just feel like there are very few Republicans who have the courage to stand up to Donald Trump. The Republican Party is no longer a traditional political party. It's become a cult of personality around Donald Trump. It's a religion, and Donald Trump is their God. He's their Lord and Savior, and their loyalty to him seems to be absolute. Their loyalty to Donald Trump is greater than their loyalty to their own constituents.
Yes. It's tragic. Absolutely tragic. Thank God he won't be on the ballot ever again, hopefully.
Hopefully.
I wanted to ask you about a couple more parts of this. The energy credits part. It's kind of confusing to me. I think most people think of the energy tax credits as $7,500 for a car or something like that, but it's beyond that. So are there any energy projects that are taking advantage of these tax credits in your district that will be impacted?
So I think first we should recognize that one of the greatest challenges confronting not only the United States but the planet is catastrophic climate change. Like, we have no choice but to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy to renewables in order to combat catastrophic climate change. So that's the first point. But second, the future of energy is renewable. It's solar. Like, in the United States, 85% or 90% of new energy generation in the United States is clean energy. And of the 90%, 60% is solar. And so Republicans are defunding tax credits for solar and renewables and battery storage, which is driving most of the electricity generation in the United States. It's an act of self-sabotage, right? The repeal of these tax credits would endanger nearly 800 clean energy projects that would generate about 156,000 megawatts of clean energy, which is enough to power 27 million homes. And keep in mind that 75% of those projects are set to be built in Republican districts. So Republicans are sabotaging themselves and sabotaging job creation and clean energy investment and electricity generation in their own backyards.
How do they get away with this? How do they dupe their own constituents into kneecapping themselves? It's like that meme with the guy who puts the stick in the bike that he's riding and falls over, right? Like, how do they get away with this stuff?
Because for them, what matters is not the energy needs and the food needs and the healthcare needs of their constituents. What matters are tax cuts for the rich. Like, that is the organizing principle of the Republican Party. That's been the constant of the Republican Party, at least from Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump.
It's shocking, man. But it seems like some of these energy tax credits are too good to get rid of, and there's some pushback there from at least in the Senate.
It's essential.
Yeah.
Like we're living in a world where AI has led to rapidly growing demand for energy. Like the AI revolution, the spread of AI data centers is putting enormous strain on the electric grid. And so repealing these tax cuts is going to raise electricity prices, and it's going to artificially restrict the availability of electricity to businesses, households, and to the AI revolution.
Yeah, you make a great point that like 90% of the new production of energy facilities are this green energy. If they take away the funding, then we don't have the power to meet the moment. So there's no alternative being proposed.
We're in a fierce competition with China. China in 2024, China added more than 400 gigawatts of clean energy, mostly solar, compared to 50 plus gigawatts for the United States. So China's outbuilding us by a ratio of 8-1. Right? When it comes to new energy capacity, China is adding the equivalent of a whole United States every 2 years.
Wow. And we're just twiddling our thumbs. Well, thank God Biden and you guys passed something in 2022 to help us, but these guys are trying to chop it up.
The IRA may be the greatest legacy of the Biden administration, and the IRA is the foundation for the clean energy transition that we need.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the most abundant energy source in the world is the sun.
Yeah.
I think that the sun might deliver more energy to the earth in an hour than all of humanity consumes in the course of a year.
Wild.
So to defund solar energy is the ultimate act of self-sabotage.
Yeah, no, the IRA wasn't actually a big, beautiful bill. It paid for itself, too, at the time. But from what I read, it was so popular, some of the tax credits, that has cost a couple $100 billion since. But that's because it was so popular. But yeah, you guys pass a bill and it pays for itself, which brings me to my next point. Talk about screwing over the next generation with global warming. What about the debt these clowns are adding to the bill? The latest CBO score I saw said it would be $3 trillion in additional debt, in addition to like $20 trillion that's already going to get added. So How do these guys even stand in front of us and pretend to be fiscally responsible when they're just adding trillions of dollars to our debt?
Yeah, so the Republican reconciliation bill is fiscally dangerous and reckless. It would add $2 to $3 trillion to the debt if the provisions are temporary, and $4 to $5 trillion if the provisions are permanent. And it would add the debt at a time when the debt has never been larger and never been more expensive. Like, most Americans are unaware that the largest line item in the federal budget is interest payments on the debt. It is second only to Social Security. We spend more on debt than we do on Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security. Right? We pay more than $1 trillion a year for interest on the debt. And we're on a trajectory to pay $2 trillion a year, which means less money for everything else. And so Republicans are putting America at risk of entering a debt spiral in which we're going to pay more and more and more for less and less and less.
I'm curious what you think about their math, because Mike Johnson and Donald Trump seem to think this thing pays for itself, and yet every other non-government agency, the CBO, everybody says, what are you talking about? These guys come up with their own math that this thing doesn't cost us a single dollar. In fact, it'll pay off some of the debt and bring in money. Where do these guys come up with this stuff?
It is voodoo math, but the Republicans have been pretending to be fiscally responsible for a long, much of the debt is the product of Republican policies. It's the product of Republican tax cuts, Republican wars, Republican recessions. The notion that the Republicans are fiscally responsible may be one of the greatest frauds perpetrated against the American people in the history of modern American politics.
Yep. 100%. I hope they get exposed for this.
I mean, think about the wars. Like, I think the Brown University has a cost of war project, which indicates all the wars that began largely under George W. Bush. When you factor in veteran health care, disability payments, will cost America $8 trillion.
Wow.
which is $8 trillion not spent on healthcare, on housing, on higher education. No wonder people are fed up with the system.
Yeah, no, I don't blame people for being upset. I mean, it's frustrating. There's two more parts about the bill I want to talk to you about. And then I want to talk to you about the feasibility of this thing passing. The AI part. This came out of nowhere that they added this part in the House bill that states can't regulate AI for 10 years. Seems like that got changed in the Senate bill that you would lose, I believe, your infrastructure funding if you do regulate on a state level. What's the story with that? Why are they doing this?
So I have a nuanced view here. I feel in an ideal world, you would want like one federal framework rather than 50 state level federal frameworks, right?
Sure.
But I believe it's wrong to preempt the states without putting in place a federal framework. So we should have legislation that sets up a federal framework for AI safety, and then you can preempt the states. But to have preemption without safety, that's wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, is there something, though, that they're trying to head off here? Like, I mean, 10 years is a strange period to pick for. I understand the bill goes over 10 years, but like,
I mean, I
what
feel like
motivated this?
Look, it could be there are business interests behind it, but there needs to, you cannot, if the federal government refuses to regulate AI safety, then you cannot foreclose the possibility of legislation at the state level. Like the federal government needs to do its job.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess an example would be like some driverless taxi or something, and like New York State wants to regulate it, but they can't because waiting on the federal government to do something.
That's a great point. That's a great point because AI is not like it's a general purpose technology. It's going to permeate everything.
Yes.
And so I think that's right.
The final thing, unless there's anything else in the bill you want to highlight, I want to talk about the SALT deduction cap. Interestingly, that affects your state, and you've got Republicans fighting for that. What do you think is going to happen with that? I know the House raised it to $40K to win over the SALT caucus. Do you have any thoughts on that since you're in the New York delegation?
Look, my impression is, look, SALT benefits New York heavily. There are a number of working class, middle class people who received the SALT deduction. The members of the delegation who have the most leverage when it comes to SALT are the Republicans in swing districts, and those Republicans have said they would not vote for the bill unless it includes a $40,000 deduction for SALT. We'll see if those Republicans stand firm, but that's their position.
I was gonna say, I don't want to get you to say anything bad about these guys, but do you think they fold in the end and they accept something lower than $40K?
Well, I mean, they folded on Medicaid. Like every Republican voted for Medicaid cuts that harm their states and their congressional districts. So
I got you. Is there anything else in this bill? There's a lot of stuff in here. There's like no taxes on silencers, all sorts of weird things. Is there anything else that stood out to you in the big, beautiful bill?
Really, the headline is the Republican reconciliation bill would add $2 to $5 trillion to the debt. It would cut Medicaid by $715 billion. It would cause 16 million people to lose their health care. It would sabotage the clean energy transition and restrict electricity supply and raise electricity prices. It would cut food and education. It would radically redistribute wealth from the working class to the top 1%. It's the exact opposite of what our country needs and wants.
Yep. No, that's seems to be the case. This is a kind of weird question, but is there anything in the bill that you think's good? I like, for example, raising the standard deduction. I mean, any thoughts on something in there?
Look, even a broken clock is right twice a day, and the bill includes changes to the low-income housing tax credit and tax-exempt bond financing that could lead to the creation of more affordable housing.
Okay. That's good to hear. Yeah, obviously, we'll highlight anything positive we can, take anything positive we can. I want to ask you about the chances of this thing passing. So Trump set a deadline for July 4th. Seems like the Senate is struggling to even pass their version, which appears to be DOA in the House. They barely passed this bill in the House by one vote. I think two guys fell asleep since they passed it in the middle of the night, so maybe they have a little extra there. But what are the chances of this thing passing anytime soon, especially the July 4th deadline? What do you think?
Um, it pains me to say this, but I feel like Donald Trump, he has such thorough control over the Republican Party that he will get the bill passed. But I doubt it will pass by July 4th. I think there are real differences between the Senate and the House that will take time to reconcile. But we have to put as much pressure on the Republicans and do what we can to limit the damage that the bill does to Medicaid and clean energy and everything we care about.
So, yeah, I think something's going to pass. I mean, is there any chance that these guys struggle so hard that they come up to that August deadline of raising the debt ceiling and they have to come to you guys to get your votes?
Hard to know for sure. But obviously you're going to need Democratic votes to raise the debt ceiling. So it's going to be a point of leverage for Democrats.
And could you guys ask for just getting rid of the debt ceiling completely in that scenario?
I'm in favor of abolishing the debt ceiling. I think we should end the brinksmanship, the weaponization of the debt ceiling. And because even the mere threat of default, separate and apart from the reality, is deeply damaging to the full faith and credit of the United States and could create a crisis.
Yeah, and it's Republicans that are using it every couple of years now.
We have to stop playing
leverage.
Russian roulette with our economy because people's lives and livelihoods are at stake.
And is there any chance that these guys flail and it gets towards the end of the year and they have to come to you for extending the taxes, or is that just no shot, no way?
Look, I'm hoping that the Republicans will self-destruct, but we have to prepare. We have to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's pretty much all the questions I had about it. So I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to us about this. It's cool to hear your thoughts. You're on the inside. I guess, is there anything else that you're working on that you want to talk about? Anything coming up or anything exciting?
Look, I think that I'm cautiously optimistic that despite the catastrophe of a Donald Trump presidency, that Democrats are well positioned to take back the House, to make Hakeem Jeffries the first African-American speaker in American history, and to build a Democratic majority that will hold Donald Trump accountable. We need checks and balances. We need a Congress that's able and willing to be a counterbalance to Donald Trump.
I appreciate your optimism. I share that. I try to spread that with people like, hey, look, it's not over. We're going to bounce back. And historically, the party in the White House gets creamed in the first midterms. And so plenty of opportunity here to do some great stuff in response to this Trump administration. So Congressman Ritchie Torres, thanks so much again for making time for us. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
Yep. See you later.